She remembered everything. It was her place to remember. She remembered herself and the way she was back then, scared and held in the lonely denial of what was supposed to be life. She had been plagued by trust, which is not something often associated with disease, but in her case it was so. Trust and naivete. Tony said he loved her, so she'd been there for him. She was there for his cruelty and his infidelities, for his lies and everything that came with what she determined to be just a hard life. She didn't push or force. In those days, women didn't do that. In those days, women did nothing but spread their legs and cook, and it was maddening. Tony wasn't ready to get married. He wasn't ready for kids or a family, and though she was raised right and was a good girl, she let him bring her to Chicago. He set her up in a small dive apartment and visited her regularly. It wasn't entirely his fault, and that had to be admitted. It was important she admitted at least that much to herself, for he wasn't the first one she trusted, not by a long way. She was thin and pretty. She had it a little rough growing up in her neighborhood. They were poor, and when the first man came with money and a few gifts, well, that's how the story goes. Then the next one, and the next, and before she knew it, there were rumors about what kind of girl she was. She crossed the bridge from Brooklyn to do a little cocktailing, and one day Tony walked in like he owned the whole joint. He had a smile like those types of guys do. "You're too pretty a dame to be in here selling things like that, girlie." He said it so smooth, and she went so willingly. She had never been a prostitute, but she had experience. She knew about men, what to do, and how to please. Honestly, most men weren't much more than circus morons in the bedroom anyway, and Tony was no exception. When she started working on him, he lost control quickly. He screamed out loud, then he started crying and mumbling something about his mama. "I love you," he said over and over again as he lay upon her breast that night. He fell asleep, and she believed him. Tony wasn't very high up, but he was climbing fast. He wanted her to come back to Chicago with him. He said she would be taken care of, and who didn't want to be taken care of? She was sold. She came with nothing, but she didn't need anything because it was like he said. She was taken care of, and it was wonderful. All day in the apartment, she read books, keeping them hidden away from Tony, who didn't like it when James get too smart. Then he called one night after a few months. He was frantic. He needed her to get dressed in that black dress she wore that time, and the favor was simple. Do what she did to him, but she would be doing it to someone else. She didn't want to, but he had to make amends about something or they might kill him. So because he said he loved her and she did love him, she did it. The guy was fat and just as ignorant as Tony beneath the sheets, but he was clean and he didn't cry. He thanked her and he left $100. A gift, he said it was. Well, here she was naive, because she thought it was nice of him to do that when she didn't ask. Tony was happy, and he said he loved her again, and he bought her some nice things, and they were back to normal for a month, until it happened again. He said he needed her, and she did it for him again. It was a different guy this time. He almost cried, but he sucked up his tears and hit her instead. Afterwards, he left $100 as well. She was very confused about that, but a week later, it happened again with the first guy, and the picture became a lot clearer. After a while, Tony didn't come around unless he needed her for that. Not for himself. Not anymore. She was soiled. She would ask him questions he wouldn't answer. They didn't go out anymore, and she understood what it all was. He made sure they were paying her, and then he stopped paying for things. She got slapped and beaten, and she read books when she was alone. She was always alone. Then one day it was over. Just over. They didn't call, Tony didn't call, but she knew where to find him, and so she went. Tony was not the Tony she'd met. He was someone else. He was someone cruel. "You don't ever come here, you fucking broad, understand? Never." She was upset and angry and screamed out, "You said you loved me, and you cried like a baby the first time we were together." Tony looked at the other men seated around the table. They smirked at the comment, and Tony's face changed. He grabbed her by the hair, dragged her into the alley where he beat her until she passed out. Then he put her in a dumpster. It was dark when she came to. She dragged herself home limping and came to a final decision. In her apartment, she turned off every light and lit every candle. She sat in the kitchen remembering everything that had passed. She had a straight razor. His straight razor. It was sharper than she thought it would be, and when she cut her wrist, it was deeper than she thought it would be. The blood spurted and the tendons popped as they were severed, and her hand went limp, though her thumb twitched. She couldn't use it to cut her other wrist, but one was enough. It had to be enough. In the candlelight, she watched the blood flow out of her, running like spilled sauce all over the kitchen table, while her eyes blurred with tears. The door to her apartment was locked and bolted. She had made sure of that. But in the haze, she heard the lock click and saw the knob turn. The door swung open. A cold, chilly wind came in with it, and many of the candles blew and then disappeared. The curtains fluttered out, then back again, and she watched the figure step into her apartment. The man looked like a circus ringmaster. He was tall, with an enormous belly. His skin was deathly pale with dark, deep-set eyes that seemed to retreat into his skull. He was dressed in a black suit with tails over a blood-red waistcoat held together by large gold buttons that shined brilliantly. A blood-red bowler hat sat atop his head with a foot-long jet-black crow's feather sticking out of a black sash. He carried a red cane with a large golden skull handle, and his two chubby middle fingers fondled the eye sockets as he held it. She stood up. Weak and terrified, her arm hung limp, but her terror increased, and her adrenaline caused her blood to flow faster. She held the razor with her good hand, prepared for what? She didn't know. Do not be afraid, the man spoke calmly. He passed with his bulk through the living room to the kitchen. He took the chair across from her and sat with his back straight. She still held the razor, but the weakness of sleep was starting to pull her down. Please, he motioned to the chair across from him. She stumbled forward as if pulled and sat down in the chair hard, slapping the razor down to the table. Her head was getting fuzzy. She blinked a long, heavy blink as the ringmaster across from her said something she didn't understand. Well, this will never do, the ringmaster announced, fondling the eye sockets of his skull in frustration. He waved the back of his hand in her direction, and power struck her, shoving her back in her seat. Her blood lay spilled all over the table like thick paint. The ringmaster took her severed wrist and held it in the blood as she watched it slip back into her wrist. Her pulse quickened. Her consciousness improved. Then he released her and readjusted himself in his seat. Clutching his cane and fingering the empty eye sockets of the golden skull, he said, "Is that better?" Yes. She realized then who he must be, and she began to cry. She cried for her life, for Tony and his betrayal. She cried for her mother, who told her that sometimes it's hard work, but you do what you have to if you love him. Her mother had learned to excuse her father's cruelties and taught her daughter very well. Now there is simply no reason for that, my dear, the man said, pulling a blood-red handkerchief from his coat pocket and handing it to her. She took it with her good hand, and the man stood up. He began wandering around the apartment. I am certain it is this bad, so I will not ask the simplistic questions, he said, walking to the closet and opening the door. He used the golden death's head cane to push the clothes aside, revealing a great pile of books. Yes, I am certain it is as bad as it seems, but my dear, you are unfulfilled, and your unfulfillment is what has me stopping by for this most personal visit. He turned towards her. Is it that I am being clear? She nodded as her heart beat faster and the fog continued to abate. Very well, he said, releasing the clothes and shutting the closet door. He returned to the table and sat, his back straight, his chubby fingers fondling the eye sockets of the cane. He sat scrutinizing her for a moment. Is this the end you wish, my dear? She thought for a moment and began to cry again. No, no, unnecessary. His voice was soothing and calm. She wiped her eyes again with the red handkerchief. No fear, he spoke, his tone soothing. His eyes told the real story of his words through the darkness of his unblinking stare. I can offer you something, my dear. Something that is extraordinary to this mundane existence, I assure you. Power, yes, to be certain, power, but more than that. He paused a moment and mused. A fulfillment, the likes of which a woman in your position could not imagine in several lifetimes. In his eyes, she could see he meant what he said, as if he had experienced it firsthand. She began to cry again. Yes, the alternative, unfortunately, is your current choice. But that, too, is not bad. You will most certainly find peace, my dear. You will move on from this mortal coil, and you will find yourself on the other side, if that is your choice. I only make this offer to you because of your want. Somewhere in the depths of you, this is what you want. A seed of desire, the likes and depth of which you cannot fathom. Of course, as with all things, you have a choice. He fondled the eyes of the golden skull and turned his free hand up, awaiting her response. She had been used for her kindness, which was probably the point. She was still pretty, but there was a sullen deadness in her gaze, which was why they didn't call any longer. She stood weakly and reached her good hand across the table to his. "Bully, my dear." He smiled with a lot of teeth and reached for her hand. His hand penetrated her. It reached inside and took hold of something else, and her body thudded to the table, dead and soulless. For a moment, she was a wisp, seeing everything from outside of herself and watching her dead body fall to the kitchen floor. The man's expression changed instantly to panic, realizing his mistake. "Oh, dear me, not like this." Quickly, he waved the cane, and in an instant, she was back inside of herself, climbing off the floor. A deep, beyond earthly power suddenly surged through her, and she stood, fully conscious and aware. She looked down at her wrist and watched it heal. She suddenly was aware of all that is and was and beyond and more. He stared, and she looked around her apartment, mostly ignoring him. She removed the clothes she was wearing, and he ogled her nakedness in passing as if it were the most casual thing he'd ever seen. She moved to the closet and found the dress, the one Tony always asked her to wear, jet black and held up by thin spaghetti straps. It showed her frame in its perfection. Naked, it now fit her better than ever before. She knew what she was and accepted the gift completely. "Are you ready, my dear?" The ringmaster stood. "There are things you must see and understand, and albeit things you wish to complete." She stepped forward, barefoot, almost gliding, and took his hand. They moved out the window, and she looked back only once as they sailed into the night. Tony didn't know what to make of her appearance the next day. She entered as if he hadn't beaten the shit out of her the day before, but she did look foxy in that black dress. It was the same one he'd bought, but it didn't look like that before. She was barefoot and ready, and the men sitting around the table nudged each other. They laughed, remembering what she said about him crying like a baby. Tony saw the look and stood up. He moved on her fast. "You didn't get the fucking point yesterday, is that it?" His intention now was to take her someplace and get one last one in before he finished her off for good. He grabbed her by the nape of the neck, and she allowed him to. She even cowered as he did it. She cowered the way she did before because she wanted to sample it. She wanted to feel. She wanted to remember who she was and what she was one last time. It didn't sicken her. She was still beautiful then, but she was not who she was now. Tony shoved her towards the door, and suddenly she stopped, holding her place like a statue. "Come with me now, you fucking cunt." It was the last thing Tony said before she raised her head and faced him. It was the last thing before she became what she had become. It was the last thing before the begging and the screaming began. Tables were overturned and guns were drawn, and a lot of shots were fired. It was in all the papers. The headline read "Gangland." There were pictures of the bodies and blood decorating the walls, and the police never figured out how they were killed. Perhaps it was a rival gang armed with baseball bats and swords, but that didn't make any sense. No one heard or saw anything as usual. Finally, the case was closed after the funerals, the great bouquets of flowers, and the new bosses moved into the territory.